But all around the cities are those who have no money, no power, who live in very, very temporary accommodations in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, in Bombay, in Mexico City, and even in the Western world. Certainly in Paris, you have a ring of suburbs where people who have no money are pushed out and live in rather unpleasant high-rise buildings. And I think she referred to these as the barbarians at the gate. And what better sign for barbarians than Aries? Aries is the new warrior, the new individual. So one of the things that we'll be seeing is a real battle between the individual, between the need for an individual to exist, to affirm themselves, to move forward in life, and those who are attached to structures that already exist. And this could be a breaking down of social form as we know it, because as things get scarcer, people now are desperate to get into the Citadel. But once they realize they can't get in, that basically they're permanently out, there's no reason for them to allow the Citadel to remain or to be invested in its continuing existence. As long as people have the illusion that there's room for me in there, that I will find a way and I will make it into one of those wonderful palaces or gated communities that other people live in. But once people realize there's no way in, then we could see some very disturbing scenarios. We live in a world that is cut off from meaning. Particularly in the United States, people work so hard, such long hours. They're having to fill their bank account, and they're just running and racing. And there's this great exaltation, as if you're going to the gym on a machine, and you come out and you get the endorphins from having worked and going forward. But there's very little time for people to actually think about, well, what am I doing? What's the meaning of this? People say, oh, well, I'm just here, you know, to love the people I'm close to. There's almost no time for self-examination. And when you step back and you look at the world and you start to see what's going on, I don't see how any intelligent person can't say, wait a minute, what is happening here? What is going on? And as soon as you ask that question, you have to step out of the realm of ordinary explanations. Certainly the explanations you might find in your morning newspaper are almost not worth the ink they're written in. The old explanations of progress and evolution and you know, individual freedom don't look so convincing at this point in the history of the United States with our trillion-dollar debts. So people suddenly, but they're so busy, they really don't have time to think about it. I don't know if you saw today, in the newspaper, there was actually a piece on how the people born, the Generation X, don't have any retirement put away. Just the first piece of saying, what's the future for all those people who right now are 43 years old, 45 years old, between 30 and 45, they haven't even started thinking about the future. And so one day people are going to say, wait a minute, what's happening? As long as they're in the system, as long as they're performing, they don't have to think about it. That if that system comes to a halt and enough people are outside it or uncomfortable in it, then the questions that come up are fast and furious. And astrology, which really steps outside, I mean, the great gift of astrology is that it has maintained thinking in pictures, in images, in myths, in archetypes, and thinking about the quality of time outside the rational model. It isn't A plus B, let's cut it into pieces and divide it into small fragments. We enter a stream of thinking about the world and what it might mean that people have always done. But usually they do it retrospectively. They do it as novelists, they do it as historians, they do it as philosophers. We do it here in the now. We name the quality of the moment. And people feel it. They feel the drumming. They feel the drums of Pluto and the acceleration of the movement of Uranus. And they're starting to respond. There's an agitation coming up in the collective psyche that's linked to that. I tend to be prudent with that. When I was a baby astrologer a long time ago, I remember reading Edgar Cayce, who predicted that the United States would split open and Earth would be sinking under the waters. And I was pretty convinced this was going to happen. And of course it hasn't, or not at least in that way, or not yet. And I also am very wary about my own age, and I think every generation believes the world will end with them. On some level, it's going to the dogs. It's really going down the drain because we're getting older. Now, I think you have to take those things into account. It's very tempting to dance to the frenzy of the apocalypse. It's very, very tempting. But as we know, we cannot predict the way that the Uranian energy will move. Nostradamus, it has been said to me that Nostradamus predicted the end of the world for 1792. I have no idea if this is true. And of course, there was the end of the world. There was the French Revolution. It ended, a world ended. It doesn't mean the world ends. There is the end of a world as we know it. We know in particular when a Mars sign, Aries, is linked to Mars, which is Mars is the breaker of walls. Capricorn, where Pluto will be, is the builder of walls. So we know that things will be broken in this time. Things can be broken to be broken open, as in birth. But a new impulse can come, and particularly control over the flow of energy within this world. I believe that we may already have the knowledge and the technology to create a new world, and that is being held back on some level. So could it be really bad? Yes. Could the world break down completely? In some places, I do believe that that's true, but I tend to be optimistic, and I think that the impulse for the new life in Aries is so extraordinary. 1933, someone was saying that Franklin Roosevelt was inaugurated the same day as Adolf Hitler. So you have an impulse that transforms society in a way that most of us would consider humane and positive and forward thinking, and another that went in the opposite direction of repression, control, I once met someone who grew up in Nazi Germany, and we were doing a tree drawing. I don't know if you know what you draw the tree you drew as a child, and he was very embarrassed to show his tree because it had a Nazi flag on top. And what I found extraordinary was that as a child, even the nature in you could be deformed and transformed by an ideological training. And I think we are in danger of going back to that. Putin in Russia has been encouraging the old-fashioned kind of nationalism and belief in Mother Russia. And we could see that, and certainly in this country, there have been echoes of that or elements of that. And that happens when we're getting ready to turn the individual into a machine for those who run the collective to use for their own ends. And that happens because the power of the individual in such numbers, when they are not content, is very dangerous for those who control society.